from every state and every city. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome you today to the First Church of Christ in Simsbury, to our town's 2015 Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. First Church is a congregation of the United Church of Christ, which affirms whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We're also an open and affirming congregation, which, following in our denomination's long history, intentionally tries to welcome all people, regardless of gender or race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Today, we are grateful to honor the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. in our church, for Dr. King was first and foremost a man of deep and radical faith who heard in his call to Christian ministry and ordination a call to civil rights, economic justice, and peace. With him, we also recognize all people who militated alongside of him, as well as those who have followed him to carry on his powerful and enduring commitment to service. Finally, it is fitting to welcome you to First Church because, as some of you know, it is here for 2 summers in the 40s that Martin Luther King Jr., as a young man, came north from Georgia to pick tobacco here in the Simsbury area. During his first summer, he came to our church to worship one Sunday, and thanks to the welcome of our organist and choir director Garland Martin and his wife Gertrude, who is still living, was warmly received and invited to sing in our choir when he could. We treasure this direct connection to Dr. King, not just today, but in our history and in that of Simsbury. Welcome. It is wonderful to have all of you here, even in the balcony. A special welcome to our guest speaker, Ms. Martha Brackeen-Harris. Honored guests, musicians, planners, and participants, welcome.
Good afternoon. Happy Martin Luther King Day. Thank you, Reverend Arakawa. This is the 5th annual Martin Luther King Jr. and Simsbury celebration, honoring Dr. Martin Luther King's life and legacy. We join the world in remembering MLK, but Simsbury makes special claim to him because of his time spent in Simsbury during the summers of 1944 and 1947. It is clear that Dr. King's profound life achievement was influenced by his 2 summers here. His writing strongly suggests that his call to ministry crystallized during his time spent with a group of Morehouse College students, earning money for their education by working at Colborough Tobacco Farm here in town. We thank First Church for hosting us here in this exquisite house of worship, which has so much significance in that MLK actually worshiped here. Special thanks to other members of the clergy here today, Father Patrick Bush of Trinity Church in Torillville, new to the parish, and Matt Blazer, new to Covenant Presbyterian Church, also known as The Barn, the lead pastor. So we're so delighted to welcome 2 of Simsbury's newest clergy members to this event and to Simsbury. Over the years, I've been proud to work with extraordinary folks on the MLK and Simsbury Celebration Committee who work year-round to ensure that Simsbury pays meaningful tribute to MLK on an annual basis. The committee members are Sarah Batchelder, Angela Griffin, Ika Scully, Tara Donahue-Willerup, TJ Donahue, Elaine Lang, and Rick Wagner. I thank them for their hard work and many contributions to putting this ceremony together. Elaine will honor us by reading some of MLK's most notable words, as well as Martin Geitz, President and CEO of Simsbury Bank. We thank them both for gracing us with their presence. We're especially grateful to the Simsbury Historical Society for partnering with us on this program. The Historical Society is a wonderful community treasure and so integral to our community. We encourage you to visit them and support their efforts to preserve and protect Simsbury's rich history. We continue to work alongside a group of exceptional individuals devoted to creating a permanent memorial to MLK right here in Simsbury. We'll hear more about their project a little later in the program from members of the MLK in Connecticut Memorial Committee. In addition to the stirring music that we have always had performed by Simsbury students under the wonderful direction of Angela Griffin, we're so excited to have the Simsbury Intonations join us this year, led by director Greg Babel, who played so beautifully the prelude music for us early. It's Babel, Greg? Greg Babel, excuse me. Thank you, Greg, and thank you to the Intonations. Unfortunately, Marge Kozlowski was left out of the program. I want to make sure that she was acknowledged. It was not intentional, and we apologize for that oversight. And we know that you'll be moved by our keynote speaker, Martha Brackeen-Harris, and we're so thankful to her for making the 2015 event truly memorable. Dr. King would have been so encouraged, so much of his dream has been fulfilled. But sadly, in the wake of such discord and hate that continues here in the greatest country on earth and across the world, it is clear we have not reached the promised land, that still more work remains. We continue to climb the mountain, but still stumble. Today, let us celebrate MLK's life dedicated to civil rights, peace, and justice. But when we leave here, let us go forth and recommit ourselves in a small way to really honoring him as acts that truly make gentle the life of this world, and finally joining him in seeing once and for all the great glory of the coming of the Lord. I'll close with one of my favorite Maya Angelou poems, which seem most fitting for this occasion. I clap hands and let's come together in this meeting ground. I say clap hands and let's deal with each other with love. I say clap hands and let us get from the low road of indifference. Clap hands, let us come together and reveal our hearts. Let us come together and revise our spirits. Let us come together and cleanse our souls. Clap hands, let's leave the preening and stop imposturing our own history. Clap hands, call the spirits back from the ledge. Clap hands, let us invite joy into our conversation, courtesy in our bedrooms, gentleness into our kitchens, care into our nursery. The ancestors remind us, despite the history of pain, we are going on people who will rise again, and still we rise. Welcome, and again, thank you for being here. Enjoy the ceremony, and it gives me great pleasure in welcoming our first selectman, Lisa Heavner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Simsbury today. I'd like to recognize Senator Kevin Whitgoes. We've got Chairman of the Board of Ed for Simsbury, Lydia Tadone. We have with us Board of Education members from Simsbury, Tara Willerup, from Bloomfield, Donald Harris, and from Killingly, Richard Murray. Welcome to you and to all of you here today. We are so pleased to join together in remembrance and celebration of the life of Martin Luther King. It is meaningful to be here with all of you in the same church that Martin Luther King once worshiped in. It was in Simsbury that he encountered kindness and compassion, leading to his lifelong and profound mission to serve humanity and pursue justice. I think that Dr. King understood that compassion and justice are one and the same. Indeed, Dr. King's experience of being treated kindly and compassionately as a human being here in Simsbury convinced him of the possibility of justice for all people. Dr. King noted that all men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And here we are today, bound together in history with Dr. King's legacy, coming together to honor him and to recommit to his dream, our dream, of justice, respect, and equal opportunity. Martin Luther King once said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" Because it is in service to others that we demonstrate our compassion, embrace our mutuality, and become a more just society. We are fortunate to live in a community where so many, as I look out, really everyone in this room, steps up to serve. All the volunteers who came together to make today's ceremony possible is just one example. Thank you to John Hampton and the Martin Luther King Committee, students and teachers, the Free Library, the Historical Society, First Church, our guest speaker, the Internations, and really everyone who played a part. Thank you also to SCTV for filming this. We see students helping students through Unified Sports and Theater in Simsbury all the time. Our community constantly organizes food collections. We saw one just before we entered today. And blood drives. Volunteers beautify our community gardens and trails or organize town events. Citizens volunteer in boards. Parents and seniors volunteer at schools and the senior center. The list goes on and on. Dr. King believed in service and spoke of it often. He said, "Everyone can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love." Sometimes acts of service receive public thanks and recognition, like today. But many times, service is done day to day without recognition. The parent or teacher helping a child who is struggling. A stranger helping a senior get their groceries to the car. A friend offering a word of encouragement or bringing a meal. Hearts full of grace, souls generated by love are what I see in Simsbury constantly. I can't think of a better way to honor this great man than what you do on a daily basis. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Podwell, Congresswoman Estie's office.
Good afternoon. I have a letter of greeting from Congresswoman Estie. Dear friends, I apologize that I'm unable to join you as you remember the life and work of Martin Luther King Jr. This nation is still struggling to live up to the promise of equal rights and opportunities for all, but I know that we can and we must do better. So today, let us challenge our family, our friends, our neighbors, and ourselves to recommit to live in Dr. King's legacy and vision of social and economic justice for all, regardless of race, gender, or any other factor. Let us aspire to make our world a better place. I know how proud Simsbury is of its ties to Martin Luther King. The 2 summers he spent here were an important part of his journey, and I'd like to take a moment to thank all those involved in creating the Martin Luther King Jr. in Connecticut Memorial. This monument will be a visual reminder for all that each of us can contribute to making Dr. King's dream reality. Sincerely, Elizabeth H. Estie.
Gives me great pleasure to welcome Father Bush from Trinity Church in Torillville to lead us in prayer.
Good afternoon. I think it's safe to say that everyone here has felt an impact on their life because of the life we remember today, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. For me personally, among many things, Dr. King is quite a theologian and has affected my faith and the way I read Scripture. And I truly believe his dream was fueled by his faith and how he read Scripture as well. And to honor such a man, we need to invite space for the Lord to be with us as well. So, if you can please stand. And let us invite the Lord to be upon this place as we remember the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let us pray. Lord, open our lips, and our mouth shall proclaim your praise. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout for joy to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving and raise a loud shout to him with psalms. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In his hand are the caverns of the earth, and the heights of the hills are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands have molded the dry land. Come, let us bow down and bend the knee and kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the sheep of his hand. Oh, that today you would hearken to his voice. Amen.
I would like to share with you some selections from the Nobel Prize lecture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which was originally delivered in Oslo, Norway on December 11, 1964. Modern man has brought this whole world to an awe-inspiring threshold of the future. He has reached new and astonishing peaks of scientific success. He has produced machines that think and instruments that peer into the unfathomable ranges of interstellar space. This is a dazzling picture of modern man's scientific and technological progress. Yet in spite of these spectacular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, something basic is missing. There is a sort of poverty of the spirit which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we have become materially, the poorer we have become morally and spiritually. We have learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned the simple art of living together as brothers. This problem of spiritual and moral lag, which constitutes modern man's chief dilemma, expresses itself in three larger problems which grow out of man's ethical infantilism. Each of these problems, while appearing to be separate and isolated, is inextricably bound to the other. I refer to racial injustice, poverty, and war. The struggle to eliminate the evil of racial injustice constitutes one of these major struggles of our time. What we are seeing now is a freedom explosion, the realization of an idea whose time has come, to use Victor Hugo's phrase. The deep rumbling of discontent that we hear today is the thunder of disinherited masses rising from dungeons of oppression to the bright hills of freedom. In one majestic chorus, the rising masses singing, in the words of our freedom song, "Ain't nobody gonna let us turn around." All over the world, like a fever, the freedom movement is spreading in the widest liberation in history. The great masses of people are determined to end the exploitation of their races and land. They are awake and moving towards their goal like a tidal wave. You can hear them rumbling in every village street, on the docks, in the houses, among the students and in the churches and at political meetings. The earth is being redistributed. A second evil which plagues the modern world is that of poverty. Like a monstrous octopus, it projects its nagging, prehensile tentacles in lands and villages all over the world. This problem of poverty is not only seen in the class division between the highly developed industrial nations and the so-called underdeveloped nations, it is seen in the great economic gaps within the rich nations themselves. Take my own country, for example. We have developed the greatest system of production that history has ever known. We have become the richest nation in the world. Yet, at least 1/5 of our fellow citizens are bound to a miserable culture of poverty. The poor in America know that they live in the richest nation in the world, and that even though they are perishing on a lonely island of poverty, they are surrounded by a vast ocean of material prosperity. There is no deficit in human resources. The deficit is in human will. The well-off and the secure have too often become indifferent and oblivious to the poverty and deprivation in their midst. The poor in our countries have been shut out of our minds and driven from the mainstream of our societies because we have allowed them to become invisible. The rich must not ignore the poor because both rich and poor are tied in a single garment of destiny. All life is interrelated and all men are interdependent. The agony of the poor diminishes the rich, and the salvation of the poor enlarges the rich. We are inevitably our brother's keeper. A third great evil confronting our world is that of war. Recent events have vividly reminded us that nations are not reducing, but rather increasing their arsenals of weapons. We will not build a peaceful world by following a negative path. It is not enough to say we must not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it. We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war, but on the positive affirmation of peace. I have the personal faith that mankind will somehow rise up to the occasion and give new directions to an age drifting rapidly to its doom. In spite of the tensions and uncertainty of this period, something profoundly meaningful is taking place. Old systems of exploitation and oppression are passing away, And out of the womb of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. It is now my honor to introduce you to Mr. Greg Jones from the Legacy Foundation.
And he wrote this song after traveling around the world and just seeing the plight of a lot of underprivileged children in many countries around the world, and just bring awareness to that and also express hope through that. And we'll have several soloists and descant singers for the song. So descant people, you can come on up. We'll have Sophie Kodak, and he's
Elaine says to me, sorry about that. Wow. Is this a middle school choir? Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much, Reverend Arakawa and the First Church of Simsbury. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you. Let me tell you first how this started, and be very brief. I live in Avon, and I've always known about, since moving here 10, 12 years ago, I've always known since moving to the Valley, known about Dr. King's experience here. And so we have a foundation. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a few minutes here. We have a foundation in Hartford, and I was looking for something very simple to do with our development program in the Valley. Wanted to get, get our boys, as I say, out in the Valley, out near where, and so I reached out to Simsbury Historical Society. Little did I know I'd end up on the program. I think I was coming to sit with that. But Elaine, thank you very much. You responded. We were just coming out to partake in a particular event, but thank you for incorporating us. And it could certainly have been any foundation or any organization in and around the Hartford area. We are glad for the opportunity. We are a new foundation. The Legacy Foundation of Hartford is a venture philanthropy. We focus on making a difference and doing it by investing in programs and operations and executing those programs. The key is execution. Earlier we talked and heard about Dr. King's message and mission about service. We believe it is not only the responsibility of others that are in those jobs, but it is everyone's responsibility to execute. So we started the Legacy Foundation of Hartford. There were 5 or 6 gentlemen that came together as a common bond. None of us have any experience in philanthropy or community service or anything, but we believe that we could make a difference. There's a banker, investment banker, there's an IT executive, there's an aerospace executive, there's an educator, and we came together as a fraternal bond to make a difference, to uplift, as we know, to really make a difference and to live out Dr. King's legacy on doing something to make a difference. And so we started out with thinking that education and health would be our focus. We address disparities in health and education, and simply because, as Dr. King says, education must enable a man to become more efficient, to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life. Education is the differentiator. We talk to our young folks in our programs all the time why education can make the difference. We focus on addressing disparities in education. We also believe one thing that's a mantra of ours is that talent is universal. Opportunities are not. With that mission, we've decided to figure out how we can create more opportunities. You never know when you have a Nobel Peace Prize winner sitting amongst you. That's probably what the folks here said in 1944. Our other focus, we focus on addressing health. We focus on the 2 main problems we think that affect the African American community, and we focus a large part of our activities in and around the north end of Hartford, and that is on health care. Again, Dr. King said, of all injustice, inequality in health care is perhaps the most inhumane. We have focused and target our energy using our business mindset and the focus of addressing disparities in health and education to execute, to do something for others, to live his legacy and to continue to do his work. It is certainly part government's responsibility, part private responsibility, but it is also our responsibility as well. We don't want to wait on anybody to make the changes that we need to make in some of our communities. We've decided to execute. We believe, as we say, talent is universal, opportunities are not. And with that mission, that's how we've lived the Legacy Foundation and trying to continue the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. I'd like one of our young mentees, Malik Howard, would you come join me, please? He has something he wants to say. Teenagers tend to be reluctant. Sometimes you force them to do a few things. See how enthusiastically he's walking up here to join me? He couldn't be happier. He couldn't be happier. Malik just has a few words to say. Yes. Take your time.
I am Malik Howard. I am a 9th grade honor roll student at Global IB Academy. I graduated from Martin Luther King School in Hartford. I am part of a college development program of the Legacy Foundation. On behalf of the Legacy Foundation, those of us who are trying to live the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, we are pleased to make a donation to the MLK NCT Memorial.
Good afternoon. It's certainly an honor to be here. I knew this was going to be a great program because I so much enjoyed working with the committee and listening in while they were planning this, and I'm not disappointed. I'd love to thank the Henry James Choir for helping me by doing the sort of setup for me. And you did a beautiful job. I love that song. Our choir was trying to learn it. I don't know if we sang it or not, but certainly we were not at the point we were able to perform it as well as you did. So I really enjoy that. Really happy for that. I love the lamps burning. When I went to visit the King Center in Atlanta, I saw the eternal flame. And that was really meaningful, because it symbolized Dr. King's commitment to eternal hope and truth. So I was so happy to hear that, because that's what it is about. We have to keep our commitment, and we have to keep hope, and we have to face the truth, and we need to look at the truth. This is a great day for me. It's a day where I can always reflect on the past, and I can celebrate the present, and I can look forward to the future and know that we will continue to get better. Since the topic of my talk today is Keep Your Light Shining, for those of us who lived during the Civil Rights era, the events of that time were burned together, or burned forever in our hearts and in our minds. But as I look over the audience, I have a feeling that many of you were not alive during the Civil Rights era. And it's funny because it seemed like it just happened 10 years ago for me. But I noticed that you then have to rely on primary documents or personal accounts of those events that happened from the people who experienced them. So the question becomes, how do you hear and see some of the horrible events that happened during those times without having your hope fade and without viewing the world as a dark, cold place? Your lamps will be tarnished if you just focus on all of the bad things going around. So we want to sort of explore that for a while. I'm a storyteller by nature. My children will know. Always a story with everything. They come to me for advice, and I'd start with a story, and they say, could you just give me the advice? But in the African tradition, the storyteller in the village was called the griot. So I'm going to tell you some of what I experienced as my family took a long journey in August of 1962 from Philadelphia to where we lived, to Beaumont, Texas, where my grandparents were. It was August, and my father was a minister. He was a friend of Dr. King's. He was born about 11 years before Dr. King. So the older ministers would meet together. Well, everyone would meet together once a year in a convention, and the older members would be able to give some sage advice to the younger ones, and Dr. King would go to some of the ministers who were in that situation and just run by some of his thoughts about what he needed to do. So August was a great time because we always would visit relatives, we'd go on car trips, we'd be able to maybe go to amusement park, but I noticed that most of our journeys were in the north. My father was born in the South. He was born in Texas, right in the middle of all of the segregation, and it left a heavy impact on him. he met my mother in Ohio, and then he got a church in Ohio. We were born. So he had a chance to live in the North for a long time. And it didn't seem as though he was very anxious to go back to the South. He wanted to see his parents, but I noticed they would always come to us. And we really didn't travel in the South. So we were excited. We were trying to decide where we were going to go, we thought. So my parents sat down with us one day and said, well, we need to talk to you about this journey. Some of the things you're going to encounter are going to be different. They didn't want to scare us too much, but they had to prepare us for some things that would happen. So I was thinking, oh, good, a journey. I just wanted to know, will we be able to stay at some nice hotels like the Holiday Inn, like in the movies? Well, my father brought out a little green book, and he told us, we can only stay in these places when we travel in the South because they do not allow, at that time we were Negroes, to just stay anywhere. And also restaurants and any services that we needed, we would have to look in the book to make sure we were going someplace that was safe. Now, I really wanted a swimming pool and a room service, so I was trying to keep hope alive, but that wasn't to be. Our first night we stopped in Virginia, and when we got there, it was, well, we looked at the description and it said natural air conditioning. I said, oh, okay, air conditioning. It was a cabin in the woods, but it had running water. I also know that when we traveled, when you traveled in the South, you could spend the night in the historically black colleges and universities if it was the summer and school wasn't in session. So I know we spent the night in a dormitory. The only problem with that was the food service wasn't open. But my mother had brought cereal, and all we had to do was find a store that could sell milk and juice for us, and that was going to be breakfast. None of those big, nice, fluffy biscuits and gravy that you read about in the South. But the most memorable place that we stayed was in Birmingham, Alabama. We finally were going to stay in a real motel. It was called the Gaston Motor Inn, and it was a place where Dr. King and a lot of the civil rights leaders often would stay while they were in town. And you know about Birmingham and the letter from Birmingham jail. That was a really pivotal place in the civil rights movement. We also, by father being a minister, we always had to go to church. So we attended a service at the 16th Street Baptist Church while we were there. It was a real Southern Baptist service. Finally, we arrived in Texas, and our real formal education about racism began. The next morning after we had breakfast, I heard an argument. My grandmother and my mother were arguing. Now remember, this was my paternal grandmother, so this was my mother's mother-in-law, so we had no idea what they were arguing about, but they really didn't get along that much. So my grandmother wanted to take us on a bus ride, and my mother was saying, no, I don't want them to go. And my grandmother said, yes, they need to go. And my mother was very distraught because she did not want us to have to experience what she knew would happen. But as usual, my grandmother won. And so there we walked to the bus stop. She instructed us to stand by the middle door, and she said, when the door opens, go in very quickly and sit in the back. So she went in the front, paid our fare. She had to get off of the bus, come around to the side, and usher us in. And all I remember was a little sign like this, flapping in the wind, that said colored, just on a string. Very, very low tech. But that was so, as the bus got full of white riders, they would change the section. So we'd be squeezed in the back, so all of the white riders would be able to get seats. And we would have to just stand at that point. Well, a lot of other things happened, but I don't have time today to go into all of those. But I do remember the water fountains going around, and my grandmother instructing us, you can't drink water from there, you can drink water from there. And another thing I really remembered was my grandfather was going to buy me a pair of red sandals, and I was so excited. So we went to the store, and he said, he looked around, he looked at my feet, and I said, well, can't I try them on? He said, no, if you try them on, they don't want you to try them on because they can't sell them again. But we just have to take them home. And I just remember being afraid, these beautiful, what little girl doesn't want a pair of summer red sandals, like Dorothy and Annie, but I remember, thankfully, they fit when I got home. But other things we experienced, but finally we did return home without a major incident except the radiator leaked. So my dad had us chew gum to try to stop it up because he couldn't stop at the gas stations. They wouldn't fix it. So that was fun for us because he didn't let us have too much gum. So, but I want to talk about what happened in Birmingham that next year. We were there in August of '62. 1963 was a really, really interesting year in our nation. The same in March of 1963, the same motel, the Gaston Motor Inn, was bombed. We had been there 7 months before. All of a sudden, this started to have an impact that, it was really dangerous. Even though we had the Green Book, you were still at danger when you had to find a place to stay. Thank goodness we were not in that bombing. It was scary to think that, Martin Luther King could have been there at that time or anything else. Then, in August, it was the March for Jobs and Freedom, and we know that's when Dr. King had his famous speech. And then on September 16th in that same year, the church that we had visited, 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, was bombed, and 4 little girls lost their lives. Now, being the child of a minister, we went to Sunday school every Sunday, and we went down, it was in the basement. And when we heard that, it just impacted us so much. I have a brother and 3 sisters, and we had been there. So it was very difficult. And by the way, when that happened, Dr. King decided he may rethink this whole campaign, because once the children started to get hurt, that hurt him deeply because it made him think of his children. But that was just a really interesting experience to have been there just before all of that happened. Well, we knew about Dr. King because my father knew him and worked with him. So in the mid-1960s, Dr. King came to Philadelphia, and he was going to rally the ministers and rally the people so we could help in the North. So my father said we were going to a church and we were going to hear Dr. King. Of course, we didn't want to go, but we had to go. And so we were there, we heard the rally, and my dad actually introduced Dr. King on that day. And so it was late, we really wanted to go home, but we knew about ministers, Baptist ministers. They talk all the time. So we decided we would go see where they were. So we were looking around and we were peeping in the keyholes and we saw them. But of course, my 4 children, everybody wanted to peep at the same time, so the door opened and we all were tossed into the room at his feet. And then, of course, it was like, we're in trouble now. But my father laughed and said, Dr. King, I think some people want to meet you. And he looked at us, he laughed, he said, this is wonderful, you remind me of my 4 children. So and that just made him, he missed them. So I know my dad was mortified, but he was nice, he never said anything. So when I say to you today, how do you keep your light shining? How do you keep your lamps polished? I know there are a lot of problems with equity, freedom, and justice, and it can be very difficult if we just focus on where we are and not how far we've come. And if we don't continue to fight for justice, all of the work that Dr. King and everyone else did is going to be in vain. As I wrap up, I just want to tell you about a life-changing experience that I had when I visited Birmingham almost 46 years after that. I stayed at the Tutwiler Hotel, which was one of the fabulous hotels in downtown Birmingham. They had a swimming pool. They had room service, no natural air conditioning. And I said, oh, okay, things have changed. We also were able to go shopping. We could eat in any restaurants that we wanted. It was a different Birmingham that I had experienced before. I could really see the change and experience the change. I went back to the 16th Street Baptist Church to get a tour. Now, I think about how that church was bombed. The ashes of that church dulled those lamps. But when I went back to visit, I looked at what they were doing in the community. They polished those lamps off, and they are a beacon in that community. The church was rebuilt. They were, had many programs for the youth. People were committed to community service, and it was a really great experience. So I know that change is slow. Sometimes we're very impatient. But let's just keep our lamps polished. Let's just keep doing the work. Dr. King was in Simsbury for 2 summers. Last August, my daughter and her 2 children moved to Simsbury, and they are right up the street from where the women who were in the tobacco fields were housed. Let's look at that. I have a granddaughter who goes to school in Simsbury. She's at Westminster School. When I was her age, people of color were not in the independent schools. So look at that. And I want just to, when I look around and I see the changes, we have a way to go, but let's just keep our lamps polished, first of all, so we can look back and see where we've been, so we can see where we are now, and so we can have a vision and a lamp that can light our way to the future. Thank you very much.
My role this afternoon is to share with you additional excerpts from Dr. King's Nobel Prize acceptance speech. As Elaine mentioned earlier, it was just last month was the 50th anniversary of him delivering that speech in Oslo, Norway. And as with so many of Dr. King's speeches, it was relatively brief. It was only 12 minutes long, and yet he put a lot of emotion and a lot of great words together in a powerful manner. So with all due respect to Elaine, she and I can read the words and share them with you, but there's really no substitute to seeing Dr. King deliver them. And one of the wonderful things about today's world is that thanks to YouTube and other channels, you can see that speech. So I would recommend that you go to YouTube and take a look at that speech. It was wonderful, wonderful speech. So here I will share with you the words, though. After contemplation, I conclude that this award, which I receive on behalf of that movement, is a powerful recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral question of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Civilization and violence are antithetical concepts. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of nuclear annihilation. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifted from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. Faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born. I think Alfred Nobel would know what I mean when I say I accept this award in the spirit of a curator of some precious heirloom, which he holds in trust for its true owners, all those to whom truth is beauty and beauty truth, and in whose eyes the beauty of genuine brotherhood and peace is more precious than diamonds or silver or gold.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out today to remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Zach Walsh. I'm a senior at Simsbury High School, and I first want to say thank you to the Legacy Foundation for your generous donation to the Martin Luther King in Connecticut Memorial Project. Thank you. I'm a co-chair of the committee, and I'm standing behind me with the other members of the committee here. So we got some renderings of our memorial here that they're helping us out by holding over there. And I'm sure at this point you've all heard about the time Martin Luther King spent right here in Simsbury and about the memorial for which we are currently fundraising. Right now we are more than 3/4 of the way to our $110,000 goal. And since we are on a good track to break ground this spring, we wanted to talk a little bit about the elements of the memorial so that as a community we can all truly appreciate the memorial when it is built. Behind me are the renderings of the memorial and that you can all look out and follow along with as we describe it. The entry and exit markers are located at the south side and north side of the memorial, respectively, in order to convey Martin Luther King's journey from the south to Simsbury. These markers will be made from brownstone, used in many of Simsbury's important buildings, and the bench, on the other hand, will be made from Georgia granite, reflecting the combination of the influences on his life in both locations. And I'm going to turn it over now to Shannon Cirilli to continue discussing the memorial.
The first of 5 glass panels in the memorial will discuss MLK's early family history. The second, his journey to Simsbury. The third and center panel will discuss his time in Simsbury and its great importance in his life. The fourth panel describes his reflections on the time spent in Simsbury as he traveled back home on a train. The fifth and final panel represents Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy as he went on to become a leader in the civil rights movement, a movement for the equality of all people. On all of the panels, the written etched text appears to float unsupported. The glass was chosen to reflect the idea that his words are not meant to be bound by walls, rather to be read by all people. I will pass the mic off to Kavya Bana, another co-chair of the Martin Luther King. And I would like to introduce Stephanie Sickinger, Meredith Sterrett, and Katrina Cirilli, who are all members of the Martin Luther King NCT Memorial Project.
So to continue, one of the defining components of the memorial is the brick pathway. Most of the bricks were purchased by Simsbury residents and are inscribed with quotes by Martin Luther King and names of family members. These bricks are still available for purchase and serve as another way to incorporate the Simsbury community into the memorial. We really want the memorial to serve as a location for schools from all over Connecticut to visit and learn about Martin Luther King and his legacy. Not only that, but we want people of all ages to be inspired by his story and the unbridled hope that truly was his dream and message. The memorial will be a place for our community to come together and reflect. Thank you for your time, and a special thanks to our adult mentors who have been with the committee since the beginning and have brought us to where we are today. We look forward to seeing everyone in the spring when we break ground.
Please rise for our benediction and stay standing for our closing song. In the book of Revelation, the saints are singing about Jesus, that the work of Dr. King, of you, Martha, and your father is not in vain and will be completed. For you are slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made them one kingdom. Go in that knowledge as we sing together.
Thank you all so very much. I wanted to thank our guest speaker, Martha, did an incredible job. Let's give her a round of applause. I wanted to note that Simsbury has the most talented students, musical students, and the students that were part of the memorial. We are so proud of our Simsbury students. I know all the town officials and all of us here are enormously proud. So I want to give you a big round of applause. And I'm going to start going on tour with the intonations because they're excellent. Let's give them a... Greg Babel does a great job, of course, and Angela Griffin, a director of our musical program, and our director of the Henry James Choir is Scott Szymanski. So let's give Scott a round of applause. Thank you to the Legacy Foundation for being here and your contribution to our efforts. Thank you to our clergy. Thank you to our dignitaries for being here. And of course, thank you to First Church of Christ for once again hosting us, our special readers Elaine Lang and Martin Geitz. And thank you so much. And let's go out and live the dream and fulfill the dream. And we'll see you in 2016. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.